Okay, so what if the story of Jesus you've always heard is missing a huge piece of the puzzle? That's what we're digging into today. We're looking at a totally different perspective on his life and his mission, and it all comes from a collection of speeches by Sun Myung Moon. And right off the bat, this source material makes a pretty bold claim. It basically says, I'm not here to tell you what you already know. I'm here to give you a new revelation from God. So, okay, let's take a look. What exactly is this new revelation?
Now, to really get a handle on this viewpoint, we have to start at the very beginning. We need to understand what this source says is the real problem of human history. The problem that made a Messiah necessary to begin with.
And this is where things immediately start to look different from the traditional story. It all kicks off with a really unique take on what went down in the Garden of Eden.
So, according to these speeches, the fall of man, it wasn't about an apple or some literal fruit. Nope, it's described as an act that actually corrupted the human bloodline itself. The source calls it a satanic blood lineage. And you have to understand, this one idea, it's the absolute heart of the problem that Jesus supposedly came to fix.
The implications of that are, well, they're massive. It means that, from this perspective, every single person was born separated from God, inheriting a bloodline that was a total deviation from the original plan. This sets up this huge cosmic problem that, you guessed it, needed an equally cosmic solution. Okay, so if you have this problem of a fallen lineage, how do you solve it? Well, the text lays out this incredibly detailed long-term plan that God supposedly put into motion to get humanity back on track. And you can see the epic scale of this plan right here. We're talking 4,000 biblical years. The source says God worked through major figures like Abraham and even Tamar to painstakingly separate and purify one specific bloodline. This was a long game, and the whole thing was leading up to one person, Mary. She was the final step, prepared to give birth to a son who would be completely 100% free from that fallen lineage.
And that whole 4,000-year prep is why, in this view, Jesus is called the only begotten Son. Think about it. He was the first person in history born totally without original sin. He inherited what the source calls the total lineage of God. This made him unique, a direct, unfiltered channel back to God. He was basically positioned to become a true parent for a brand new, restored human family.
But here's a key point. His mission wasn't just spiritual, not at all. According to these speeches, Jesus' #1 goal was to build the physical kingdom of heaven right here on earth. And how was he supposed to do that? By finding a bride, starting a true family, and restoring humanity's actual physical bloodline. All right, so the plan is in motion. But this is where the whole story takes a really dramatic turn. The divine plan, perfect as it was, slams right into a critical human failure.
So, the big question is, what went wrong? Well, according to this narrative, the entire plan, everything, it all came down to the actions of one key person. And that person dropped the ball. And that person was John the Baptist. The source claims he had this absolutely immense responsibility on his shoulders. I mean, he was the prophesied return of Elijah, the representative of the entire Old Testament age. His job was to be the cornerstone for Jesus' kingdom, to get everyone united behind this new Messiah.
But just look at the difference between his mission and his actions. His mission? To serve Jesus, to rally the people. But what did he actually do? The speeches point out that he straight up denied being Elijah. And then later, from prison, he sends his own disciples to ask Jesus, hey, are you really the one? That doubt right there is presented as the exact moment his mission completely fell apart. And the source doesn't pull any punches. It frames this as an absolute catastrophe. That single failure, that moment of doubt, it's said to have completely severed the link between Jesus and the people. It left him isolated and forced his entire mission down a much, much harder and ultimately tragic path. So, with the original plan totally off the rails, the whole purpose and the outcome of Jesus' mission had to change. It was fundamentally altered. He had to pivot. Hard. He had to go to plan B. And this leads us to what is probably one of the most radical claims in the whole text. The crucifixion was not God's original plan. From this point of view, the cross wasn't the intended path to victory at all. It was that tragic plan B, a secondary course that only became necessary because of human failure.
So let's break down what happened because of this pivot. The crucifixion, even though it wasn't plan A, still achieved something incredibly profound, spiritual salvation for humanity. It allowed Jesus and the Holy Spirit to become spiritual true parents. But, and this is the critical distinction here, the original mission, the job of restoring the physical world, that was left unfinished.
Okay, let's wrap this up. What are the big takeaways from this perspective? First, salvation through the cross is spiritual, not physical. That's huge. Second, you know the story of the temple curtain tearing? Well, here, that symbolizes the opening between the spiritual world and the physical world. And all of this leads to the biggest conclusion of all, the work of actually building God's kingdom on earth. That job is still not done. Which, of course, leaves us with a pretty provocative final question, doesn't it? If Jesus' work on earth was left incomplete, then what does this new revelation suggest has to happen next to finally, once and for all, get that original mission accomplished?